Welcome to the Swing Trading with Cycles channel. This is where we time the markets without predicting the markets. We do that by focusing on trend analysis so that we can identify those reversal points and get in early on the new trend. And so this video will be focused on oil stocks, energy, and so we'll start with WTI, and we'll start with the daily chart. I tweeted about this. If you're not following on Twitter, please take a look at the links in the description. You'll see a link to the Twitter account for timely updates. So we're here on October 9th. So we have that first week of October that closed. And as I tweeted about, we clearly have a daily cycle low, this being your day number one. And if I add these back in here, Friday was day 10. Or actually, I should say today is day 10, what will end up being the Monday candle. October 10th. And so we made a slight higher high, and now we're just kind of consolidating here. It hasn't really broken down. You'll really, and these are the CFDs for WTI. You'd really need to go below, let's call it like 88 bucks to get concerned, right? And so that's important to understand, right? And so anything in that area is just kind of consolidation. That's on the daily chart. That's micro. If you think about the yearly chart, so this is linear, so taking the log off, like logarithmic. This is your big yearly candle here, right? And so this is important to understand. When you have this like big upper wick here, it means the next candle is going to be an inside candle, right? Because if our range is like think about that. That's the low end of the range, this line here. And this is the high end of the range. So we're talking about a massive range from $74 to $130, right? Not very helpful to trade within, but it means within here you're going to get really kind of trappy action potentially, right? Where price isn't really making a decision, because it's still just working through a range that already existed, right? Where we got a massive rejection. This is like that war-fueled spike earlier in the year where we kind of really pulled back massively. And Brent Crude has the same kind of look to it. But if you zoom in on a monthly chart, this is important. We have a monthly swing low so far, right? So far. That could change. We have a lot of months to trade. We literally only just traded, 1 week of the month, but the high from last month was 90.37, and we're now at 91.99, right? So as long as we stay above 90.37, and this is on the CFDs for WTI, that makes September a swing low, a monthly swing low. That is a big bullish signal. Now, that said, I've been calling this earlier like that this looked like your 3-year cycle high in real time, right? And we did get a decline right below that, and then a massive pump higher, and then this exhaustion, and then we moved lower, and we did, just to be clear, we're still below that swing high, right? This month, right, this March candle marks the high. And so the low from that candle marks our swing high. And so that's right around 94 bucks, which makes that area somewhat of a magnet to be tested to the underside, right? And we'll see how it reacts to that. So that's important to understand. And this line here, just to be clear, is the 50 period moving average. So in this case, it's a 50-month moving average. So, we could see some, like, if we have a true waterfall decline across like indices in Q4, we could see this thing plunge. So that's an important thing to understand. So this green candle, it looks incredibly bullish. We've made this higher high so far, but we have so much month to trade. It's so important to understand this candle was incredibly green at one point. Like, this was all full. It was all body. And then it pulled back. It didn't quite go red, but that happens, right? Candles transform. And this thing has a long way to go. But so far, this is a pretty bullish signal. And let's see what Brent is doing on this same level. Right. So Brent has just slightly made a higher high as well, and is and Brent is more like that's what is trading sort of in the European market, like outside of the US, let's say. And so we're now going to look through about 12 names, a lot of them submitted by, some of them submitted by folks, by subscribers. Appreciate that. And so we're going to look through them. We're going to look, relatively quickly, but we're going to just make sure that, and I'll just caution that I'm not looking at this from a fundamental perspective at all, really just looking at the charts. And if people want to comment about the fundamentals, I think that would be awesome. That's great. Let's, make sure that we're adding that kind of information to the community. My perspective, I can't be an expert at every single asset class, right? Like, or I should say like every single sector. And so I'm using shorthand, this data analysis, right? So VLO, we'll start with the yearly chart actually, right? Like same kind of idea as the, we'll turn log back on. And so VLO, I do know this is a sort of refiner. So it's not necessarily completely vertically integrated like an Exxon, for instance. But this thing just kind of was just making all-time highs at around 146, and it's down here at 113. This is your yearly chart again. So in this case, just to be like super crystal clear, we're already making a higher high on the yearly. We've just pulled back and we have a little wick. So this thing is incredibly bullish. Like in the same, like, so I will say, as we look at some of the other charts, there are other conditions where it's a little bit more de-risked, I guess. But in this case, when things are making higher highs, it's all good as long as they also make higher lows. That's the important piece. Like they can hold a higher low. But this looks really bullish on the yearly. And let's just like zoom down to the monthly from there, right? We'll turn the log back on and look, this looks more or less kind of sort of like a bear flag though, right? You have this big bearish outside candle. That was the month of June that just completely took out all of this range and almost took this out. And we eventually kind of tested that, but we sprung back up, right? And so that's interesting. So for Valero, VLO, you really, it depends on how aggressive you want to be. But like, if you want to be relatively conservative, it's really a break above 126 that gets us back to 146. And, a little bit more aggressive, you could even enter around 121, something around there. But this thing looks pretty bullish. Let's see, what is the dividend on this now? That's interesting. Let's just pop in here. Ooh, 3.45%. Not bad. Not bad. And what is that doing? Like 51 billion in revenue. And our market cap is 44 billion. That's interesting, right? That's something that you could, that seems like an interesting risk adjusted trade. Now, if we look at if we look at the weekly chart, right, you can see our last major weekly low was something like that, right? And so that would put us, where would that put us in terms of, so that would make it, week 12. So that's the thing. Short term, maybe a little bit dangerous. But you would expect we're going to come in and try to test like this kind of level here, right? Like that 125. And we're sitting here below 114. So that's a nice range. And there certainly are, options within here to risk, right? In terms of risk reward for your stop loss. Now, because this is the same kind of thing across the market, as I mentioned in my weekly report, because of this upper wick here, which is the same condition of like SPY, QQQ, IWM, this is going to open as an inside week. So it's going to be a big nothing burger in between, the levels from that weekly chart. So, something like, call it 120 and 108, which is a pretty wide range. Right, between 108 and 120. That's obviously a really wide range. But this is an interesting bet. And that's obviously a single stock name. Now XLE, ETF, and they're all doing this similar kind of thing. Or I guess we didn't talk about VLO doing that. Oh, so that's important actually. So VLO, the right there you go. So the Friday candle was a bearish outside candle, made a new high, and then took this all out. So this 3 days of trading were all taken out. And notice there was actually a gap in play. Oh, that's interesting. So we basically, it would seem, kind of sort of filled the gap, right? I mean, not completely, but basically. So this was a high of 112.67, and this is a low of 112.83. So did not get down to 67, but maybe close enough, right? So this like little gap got filled. Did not get back to the 10 period moving average, so you might expect it's going to make that trip down there possibly too, right? So maybe that's why the gap didn't close completely. So that's important to know about. Like, this is a pretty big bearish candle, right? XLE, not the same thing, right? Look at the character of this candle and this is your daily chart, to be clear, right? You really want to, for XLE, to move below, call it 80.31. That would be a new low on that daily chart, but it stayed well above that. So this is basically kind of bull flagging. And on the weekly, looks like we have a nice little swing low coming out of the previous week. So this would be, if we continue our move up, this would be our second week of follow through. There is a gap here, and that is important to know about because that will probably get filled at some point, right? So that's a gap between 73 and 74.59, so like over $1. Yeah, that'll probably get filled at some point. That's good to know about. And on the monthly chart, haven't quite made the new monthly high, but this, I mean, most bullish interpretation, this is a bull flag, but this is the same pattern we saw on that other chart, right, on VLO, where you have this big bearish outside candle June, and so this is potentially a bear flag, but we know things don't always play out exactly the way they might, the most likely route per se. And now XOP Explorers, so also did not make a new low. Same kind of idea, same pattern as XLE, it looks like. Same kind of thing with a bull flag. Exxon. Ooh, look at this. Wow. Exxon is just kind of moving. Like, let's see. What is the percent increase here, right? Let's say from here. Already up 21% in the last like 2 weeks. That's pretty big for us, especially for stock that big, right? And on the monthly chart, well, look at that. Well, looky loo. Exxon is like making new highs. Like, this is a bull flag that's breaking out. That is really interesting, right? So, I mean, wow. And you'd expect this thing is going to break out above 104 and just kind of theoretically maybe never stop looking back. So let's see, what's the market cap on this thing right now? 421 billion, and that has a 3.4% dividend yield. I mean, this thing is making higher highs. Let's see, what does it look like on the lower time frames? So right on the daily, held that. So the level on this guy is in the 98 range, so 98.44. That would have been a new low on the daily. Got nowhere near that. Closed at 101. You're right. So like this is also just has a nice little swing low on that weekly. That's nice. PSX, Phillips 66. Same kind of idea or similar idea, right? Still bull flagging. Call it above 91.60. Your absolute ripcord level, call it 89.5, right? So this thing is setting up something nice, and ooh, yeah, right? So this thing kind of swept these lows. Did not quite make a new low below this, I don't think, right? So low at 73.85, low at 74, right? So slightly higher low than this, I should say. And Wow, nice big candle up. So you imagine maybe going to test the 100 area because, right, all-time highs are 124. And in that case, we have a slight higher high on the monthly. Also, again, this same pattern, that June big bearish outside candle. So OIH, that's the oil services ETF, VanEck, and this thing has some acreage on it. So we'll look at the weekly chart. That's your 200 week moving average in yellow, and you can see how it gapped above it. So again, gaps are really not to be trusted because they tend to get revisited. And so that's important to know about, just kind of make peace with, right? So that's a gap between like 216 and 222. So that's big. And we're now kind of trying to come up here, make some higher highs. And again, we're really early in the month, so we could see a move up and then a big pullback down. But if we look at the yearly chart, oof, look at that. So we pulled back, but still looking like we're holding this yearly big breakout. COP, the ConocoPhillips. Let's look at the yearly chart. Ooh, look at that. Let's just go back to look at some of these yearly charts actually. PSX. See, now that's interesting. It kind of made a higher high, then got rejected. So now it's a question of does it get back up in here, right? But XOP, look at that, right? Higher high off of this thing, right? Reversal. XLE, ooh, that's bullish, right? Turn auto on, right? So we had this huge dip lower inside year, and now we've gone up, right? And now we're just like, it just seems so unlikely we don't test this area here, right? Like that 100 area. So that's another 25% kind of thing, right? VLO, right? We talked about that already. Devon Energy, ooh, look at that. We just went, ooh, and then we just bounced up. So now we want to take out all this stuff, or at least kind of test. Can we get there, right? Like 92, 95 on a $72 stock. That's really nice. The one, and of course 127 is the all-time high. MRO, that's Marathon. Ooh, look at that candle. My God. So we had the big move down 2020. Then we opened here in 2021, made a new high, and then we're just kind of building off of that now. Very, very bullish. Especially after, look at this long consolidation, right? These are, each candle here is an entire year of price action. So this thing just kind of did nothing, chopped around. I mean, obviously you had this kind of big rally and then this big dump. So like in this time period, there was massive volatility, to be fair. I mean, this is a pretty big dump. That's a pretty big rally. But like, you really just went nowhere. But then you trended higher here, had the massive collapse, nice little trend, like, and then another collapse. So it'll be interesting to see how this thing plays out. CVX, Chevron, ooh, look at that. Look at this thing, man. It's just been up only, basically, right? Almost no, like, so we had a little pause, pulled back. That was through 2020. Inside year, that seemed like a familiar pattern, right? And then boom. So like we're now in clear air, right? Your level you'd come down on what would be something like 137, right? And we're at 160. That's just like kind of clear air. And you have African Oil Corp. Oof, this thing just has been down only since this big down year 2014, and then 2020, this really annoying doji year, but still way off the low, like price rejection down there, but also price rejection up here. But then the next year, 2021, boom, higher high. Once we break above the high of this candle, which is 129, right? We start moving up, but we got this like movement, like this is a big pullback on the lower time frame, right? This is 2020, the 2021 candle, but then we got follow through. Now we see how does this candle close for 2022? What do we get for 2023? And if we zoom in to like your monthly chart, for instance, there it is. Look at this precipitous decline. It's like it just fell off a cliff. That's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. This month was a lower high, right? We rallied. At some point, this was green. It had people completely faked out. And then we just closed. Oof, just oof. And then we got follow through. And then this month was like, oh, we actually even closed green. This started green and then closed red. And then we just kind of cascaded lower, lower, low, below here. Consolidation, fake out, lower low below these lows, sweep the lows. And now we're kind of carving a bottom out, right? Like you can kind of like, you can kind of see a structure, right? Kind of reverse symmetry. This cluster up here, right? Call it $6, 530, 5.5, 4, 333. Like you can see a world where all of these become kind of magnets in a way. This is some nice consolidation right here. I mean, wow, this is actually really bullish. If we kind of zoom in micro, because this is a bullish hammer candle for, October. That's pretty amazing. Now we need to see follow through. What we really need to see is a breakout above, call it 227. Or excuse me, 233. And we're here at 227. But that's really interesting. I mean, after this big reverse symmetry move, and what was the move down from, let's say, even here down to here, 88%. And if you went all the way down to here, 95%. My God. So this actually could be pretty interesting. Let's see. What is the market cap on this thing? 1 billion, 2% dividend. Do we have revenue? That's interesting. Not a ton of data. Okay. And finally, CTRM, that's Castor Maritime. Oof, that's not looking good, so hot. Let's look at the yearly. So, right. So this yearly chart looks, and so this is a stocks, some kind of stock split, I'm assuming. This looks really bad, right? Like it has 4 years of price action, and all 4 years are still red. That's not good, especially in a sector that's now, like you saw the other bullish charts, not a good sign. And more importantly, in the proximate, this is a weekly bearish outside candle, right? Now, because it's a doji, right, we're like right in the middle, it's a lot less of an actionable signal in terms of like to the bearish, like to either side really, but just not a good look, especially after like this decline here. This is threatening to be a lower high and take us to lower lows. And wow, that would be all-time lows. That's also not a good sign when the bottom is just kind of, when there seems to be almost no bottom beneath it. That's interesting. And wow, at $1 billion. Oh, right. So this is actually, so market cap here is 109 million. So that gives it a lot of potential upside on any kind of, positive catalyst, but that's kind of asking for a lot, I suppose. So that's your kind of sense of general oil names, some of the more popular ones. In general, there's some of the more bullish charts we're seeing here. Again, most weekly ones are, not all, we just looked through a ton, and I'll add in the description the sort of order that we're going through them. But you can see we're going to have to wait till that CPI print comes out to see some real resolution. Otherwise, we're really just kind of trading on an inside week. So more to come.